Lesson 7-5, solving two-step inequalities. So we're going away from our equations, which have an equal sign, and this time we're talking about inequalities, which we have also learned before. That's our less or greater than, less than, greater than or less than or equal to inequalities. So we have learned how to do a one-step inequality, which are listed below. Let's practice one of those. So if I look at number 1, w plus 4 is greater than or equal to negative 5. You solve these just like an equation, as if this was an equal sign. Get rid of the constant by doing the opposite operation. So I'm going to minus 4 instead of adding 4. Do that to both sides. I have just w greater than or equal to negative 5 minus 4 is the same thing as adding a negative, negative 9. W is greater than or equal to negative 9. W can be a lot of numbers, anything bigger than negative 9. So that's why we graph them to show all of those solutions. So on our graphs, remember we show 2 points, 0 usually, and negative 9 wherever it falls. Since this is a greater than or equal to symbol, remember that we fill in the circle. If it was just a greater than or less than, we have an open circle. If it's greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, we fill in the circle because W could equal negative 9. That's why we fill it in. Because W is anything bigger or greater, we put our arrow to the right. So this might take some review with our inequalities. All right, so let's try a two-step. You don't do anything differently. It's just like solving an equation. So first, you want to undo the constants, the numbers by themselves. Add 3 to both sides. Doing that, I have just 2y less than or equal to negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. Now I'm dividing by 2 to both sides to get rid of the coefficient. The 2's cancel. I have y, my symbol, less than or equal to, negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So here's part of the answer, and then you also include the graph. 0 is plotted. Here's negative 1. It's a less than or equal to symbol, so I'm filling in the circle. Then you have to go back to your inequality and read it. Y can be anything less than or equal to negative 1. Less than means smaller, so I'm drawing my arrow to the left. So this and the graph are part of your answer. Let's do one more. All right, getting rid of the constants, I'm going to add 6, opposite operations. Negative 10 plus 6 is negative 4. Copy down the symbol, greater than or equal to symbol. Half times x. All right, well here's a fraction. We learned in one lesson that instead of dividing by the fraction, I can just multiply it by its reciprocal, 2 over 1, times 2 over 1. So my fraction's going to eliminate. I have just x, and negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Now, graphing this inequality, the variable's on the other side, so you have to read it this way instead. To graph this, I know I need negative 8 plotted, so here's 0. We'll say that negative 8 is right here. It's a equal to symbol, so I'm going to fill in my circle. But now, which way do I draw my arrow? I'm going to read it looking at my x and reading right to left. X is less than or equal to negative 8. Remember, I can also write this as, I'll get a new color. I can write this as x. Notice it's pointed to the x. The open part is away. So this might be easier to read. X is less than or equal to, so I'm going to the left, negative 8. All right, now, when you are working with inequalities, it is super important that if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to change the direction of the inequality symbol. We've learned this before, but you have to remember that now. Let's do an example where this will happen. In this inequality, it's a two-step. I'm going to get rid of my constant. I'm going to minus 6. Negative 9 minus 6 is a negative 15. Keep my symbol. I have a negative 1/3 x. Now, working with fractions, instead of dividing by a fraction, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. The negative stays. Multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm multiplying by a negative 3. In an inequality, when you multiply or divide, we just multiplied by a negative 3. This inequality symbol is going to flip direction. The fractions cancel out. I'm left with my x, my symbol flipped, and now I have negative 3 times negative 15. This is going to be a positive 45. X is greater than 45. Here's 0, here's 45. Open circle because it doesn't include 45, and x is anything greater, so I point to the right. One more example of a negative where you have to switch your sign. Minus your constant, subtract 4. I have negative 2m less than or equal to 30. To get m by itself, I have to divide by a negative 2. Divide by a negative 2. When I do that, as I divide by a negative, my sign is going to flip. I have just m. 30 divided by 2 is negative 15. So if you forget this step, you'll get your problem and your graph wrong. It's very important. Now graphing, I have 0, negative 15. Remember, I'm not picky how you plot your numbers as long as it's on the right side of 0. M is greater than or equal to, so I'm going to fill it in and point to the right. The last example is writing writing the inequality from a word problem. So, in this example, an expedition leader estimates that a group of snowshoers, I think that should say snowshoers. Yeah, it should say snowshoers, can carry less than 550 pounds of food. They can't carry any more, less than that. And equipment. The group must carry 336 pounds of equipment as well as 25 pounds of food for each climber. What's the greatest possible number of people in the expedition? Okay, here's how they set up their equation. 336 is the amount of equipment plus 25 pounds of food per person. So they're timesing it by P for people. All of that weight has to be less than 550. So then, let me look at my next screen. Here's my same equation. Now we're just going to solve for P. So I'm going to subtract 336 from both sides. I have 25P less than, you can do this on your calculator, 214. Divide by 25. Divide by 25. I get P equals 8.56. Now we're talking about people, and we can't go over the 550 pounds. I can't talk about people as a decimal. We only have whole amounts of people. So am I going to say 8 people or 9 people? Well, if I went up to 9 people, that's going to be more than my 550 pounds, so that's not going to work. So my answer is P is less than 8 people. Oops, that's an 8. So I'm going to put 8 and put my 0, and P has to be less than 8. Now, because we could allow for a little bit more than 8 people, we could probably fill in this amount because we know that 8 people will still be enough weight. So that one you just have to use your judgment. All right, I'm going to skip ahead to the lesson check. There are 4 problems for 7-5. Take your time. Remember, when working with an inequality, flip the sign when you multiply or divide by a negative number. All right, good luck.